what I want to get to is, either get out, go back to West Africa, or stay in Spain and become, Catholics, and then they became another word known as Moriscos, if I'm pronouncing that right, or Morenos.
Yeah, Morisco. Yeah, you're Morisco.
Yeah, So as they became, that, and they became Catholics and stuff, they served the King and Queen of Spain, Isabel and Bernadette. What I want to know is, as they started, working for them, what was these Moors, these converts now that I'm going to call them because they no longer call themselves Moors, what role did they have in the so-called transatlantic slavery?
Oh man, brother, that's a very, very good question.
Well, yeah.
Break it down.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead. I just want to say, listen, go. It's my fault, brother. Go ahead, Ish. I'm gonna go after you because I was gonna.
Go ahead, God. I need to take notes. I need to take notes from the great God. Go ahead and build on that.
I was just gonna say that this one particular group that you're talking about, brother. They the ones that became Catholic, and even a few of the northern Berbers, they told Queen Isabella, because they did have she gave them they gave them what am I trying to say? They told her not to take them. They knew where stronger men were in Equatorial Africa. So, she gave them the ultimatum to either go one direction or go the other. So they gave them the green light to go into North Africa, go past Northwest Africa, and go into equatorial zones of Africa. But here's the thing.
Brother,
go ahead.
What were those specific type of Moors called? Because that's important for the people.
Well, these people a lot of them were mulattoes. Some of them were Tawny Moors, and a few of them were black Moors. They were already watered down. And a few of them were darker skinned or blue, black, or whatever you want to call them. But overall, they were mulattoes. They were already watered down. They spent so much time in Spain, they really didn't identify themselves with the continent in certain areas like they used to. The northern part of Africa, especially the Mediterranean part, these people looked at that as like another grantion of southern Europe. And we have to also understand, too, in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco or Medi Kush, people have been interbreeding with people from southern Europe for almost 9,500 years. You have, according to the Centimorgan or the molecular clock, you have mitochondrial DNA in northern Africa that's been up for so long that we can't say that it's new. So what I'm trying to get to the conclusion is that, yes, they had ties with Queen Isabella, a few of the Moors, and they gave them the green light to go in certain parts of Africa and take certain people, including some of their own. They didn't care. It was all about trade. They didn't really care who was who. They didn't.
So let me interject here, Brother Africanus. let me interject, Brother Africanus, right here. Okay, so would it be a fair assessment? We just said these brothers were away. I mean, we could actually, and it kind of hurts me to even say this, but brothers lose their identity sometimes. And when you're away from so long, and this is a question too, majority of the Moors, the people that were there, were basically the men. They were male dominant, correct? There weren't too many females that left with them.
They didn't take a lot of women with them. No, they didn't take a lot of women with them. You had women there, but that's when they was established. When they got established, they started allowing a few women to come. But overall, they were majority men. Yes, sir.
So the brother, I'm in no way, please, no one out there on social media, Brother Africanus does not agree with interracial relationships, but a man gonna do what he got to do. Okay, so the brothers are there.
Man,
their women is there. They're gonna have sex. They had sex with these women and birthed another mulatto, spawned another mulatto race of people. Now let me say this: would it be a fair assessment to say these brothers were no longer African?
Can I touch on that one? And then I'll let you go, Rosie.
Yeah.
Right,
Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, when we talk about the 20 Moors, the definition is a dark-skinned native of a non-European land. So that's a very vague definition, right? So when Brother Ngozi is talking about most of them were mulattoes and most of them were already diluted, we can say that they may not have had the traditional African culture as in the Blackamoors, or they didn't experience certain things that the Blackamoors experienced. So I wouldn't go so far as to say they weren't African because they probably had genetic African markers, but culturally they may have been lacking something that we would identify as African.
Especially when they became Catholic. You know they lost their mind. And it wasn't so African culturally. But we have to be careful with the word. Well, I'm African, but the thing is, even the original Afri tribe who once lived in Carthage, which is modern day Tunisia, right, or Tunis, they were also a group of Amazigh, or what we refer to as Barbar people, or Berber. They were before the whole continent was classified as Africa. Linguistically speaking, the people that was identified as Moor or Mori, or this Berber type people, northern Berber type people, even the ones in Tunis, which is modern day Tunisia or Carthage, the Afri, people of the cave or people of the dust, who live in the Sahara, backwards and forwards. They were also an Amazigh speaking people. Before all of the rest of equatorial Africa and sub-Saharan or below the Sahara or beneath the Sahara was classified as Africa. So even the original Afri population or group of people were Berber, the same type of people that were in Morocco and in northern Mali and then also in northern Niger and some of the Fula groups and different types of people. These type of people these were the original Afri.
You ever heard of an Adanga man?
No.
An Adanga man, check this out, is an African king. Now this is an African word. Adanga man, ain't come from over here. Ain't come from the white man. And a Dunga man is an African king who destroys villages and cultures in Africa, enslave the people, and sell them to the white man, knowing what the fuck the white man gonna do. That's an Adunga man. That's Al Sharpton. That's Jesse Jackson. That's all them Negro motherfuckers that's telling you, don't fight, don't riot, just be chill and march. You ain't no army, but you marching. Those are Adunga men, okay? Mm-hmm. Because those Adunga men not only sold slaves to Europeans, but to Moors. The Moors treated the slaves with some favoritism. 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 But the European went in on the torture. Mm-hmm. Okay? So a lot of people don't know that. You hear people say, even hear some Africans say, oh, there wasn't no Africans enslaving people and we didn't have that sophistication. Right. Bullshit.
Moorish history. And I started to understand the concept of what Moor, people often talk about how confusing, well, what is a Moor? It's such a broad term. If you look up the origin of the word, sometimes the term refers to people whose ancestors are African. Other times they say it was just a reference to anybody who was dark in complexion. Then you'll find more specific references to people who are said to be linked to the land of Moab, which is today the country of Jordan. Then you see other people say that it was used as a reference to Native Americans. Well, how can it be all those people? Isn't it just another word for black? Well, the answer is no. And the reason is because black has too much baggage attached to it in terms of the law. So if we go back and understand the law, in terms of how, and it was noted earlier about us living in a republic, right, in terms of the United States. The United States is a democratic republic. Rome was a republic. What could you be if you lived in Rome? What would your status have been? You could have been a Roman citizen. You could have been a Roman resident or alien resident, which meant you were not a citizen. Or you could have been a Roman slave. If you're not a citizen, you're a resident. If you weren't a citizen, you didn't have the rights of the citizenry, right? If you were an alien who were waiting to become a citizen, then you weren't a slave, but you still didn't have the rights of a citizen. It's the same thing in U.S. history. What my uncle would talk about, in addition to just these basic aspects of knowing our history, was also knowing aspects of our historical connection to the United States. And I know Canada is a different situation, obviously, because of different history. And how to navigate that is something that we can talk about. But the United States as a democratic republic, different situation. So what I decided to do after I finished my undergraduate in history, and my undergraduate was really focusing more on Civil War history and aspects of Reconstruction, I decided for my master's thesis in history that I wanted to focus on the Moors, because my uncle had convinced me that there was something there. Now, mind you, the only information I'm getting about the Moors is essentially from my uncle, who's a member of the Moorish Science Temple. I wasn't even a member initially. I was just listening to him, and then I would say, okay, let me check that out. So I went off to college, and then I said, wait, what he said was true. Then I started meeting people from Europe, from Italy, and Portugal, and Turkey, who were telling me the things that my uncle was saying were true. And I said, my uncle didn't have a college degree. But this was someone who was attentive. This is someone who was interested in seeking knowledge. We talk about the ancient Greek notion of know thyself, which of course was, they say that the Romans borrowed, right? But the origin even of know thyself originates in the Nile Valley. That's a Kemetic belief. Know thyself. Study yourself first. In studying yourself, you begin to know the world, you begin to know others, and you begin to know God. Now that may sound blasphemous in some people's minds, that how can you study yourself and know God? Well, again, we can have that discussion later about the differences in religion. As fate would have it, I ended up being asked to teach a history of Christianity class, and I didn't want to teach it, but I got a free trip to Egypt, Jordan, and Israel, so I took it. But as, again, fate would have it, that experience would allow me then to learn more about the different schools of thought in Christian communities. Groups like the Ebionites and the Adoptionists and the Gnostics, right? All of these communities that were basically giving a different understanding of the teachings of Jesus the Christ that, amazingly enough, turned out to look a lot like Moorish science.
Clarity is, I don't put the Moors only within the context of Islam as in 8th century, excuse me, I should say as in 7th century religious tradition. The Moors as a people have been here been on the earth since there have been people, since there's been earth, right? And if they entered into the British Isles calling themselves Moors, and then the Latins, meaning the Romans or the Greeks, were calling them Moros, essentially just added an us onto the end, or an us onto the end. They were simply calling them by what they call themselves. But like I say, your reference is a good one. I'm glad you brought that up. The fact that there is clear evidence of a pre-Islamic Moorish presence, if you will, in the British Isles. And what simply happened was that those people were subdued. When I saw, anyone saw the movie Rob Roy? Yeah. Okay. And what's his name? I think his name was William Wallace, who was this hero, this national hero. I just wonder, this is just a question, I just wonder if when they start talking about these national leaders in that era, if we're not talking about people who would have looked more like you or I in those isles at that time. I mean, it's something to consider, particularly when you look at the coats of arms and you see that. The name Mac is a reference to the son of a Moor. That's right, Mac Douglas, Douglas, behold the son of the black man. So the reality is we were everywhere. The only thing that, creates some problems, of course, is some people still think of Moor within the context of Islam and the Arabs. So once you say Moorish, in most people's minds, you've confused them, because their reality of Moorish is only the people living in Spain and Portugal and in Morocco who are Muslims. And that's the battle that I'm fighting, to try to get people to understand that before there was the religion of Islam, there were Moors.